The 1970s were a golden age for American dining. Families loaded into station wagons, teenagers cruised strip malls after Friday night football games, and road trips were defined not by GPS coordinates, but by the neon signs of beloved restaurant chains stretched across the highway. These restaurants weren't just places to eat. They were cultural landmarks, community gathering spots, and a central part of the American experience. From coast to coast, millions of people shared the same booths, ordered the same meals, and created memories that still linger decades later. But somewhere between shifting tastes, corporate mergers, economic downturns, and changing demographics, these beloved institutions closed their doors. Today, we rate taking a deep dive into 10 popular 1970s restaurants that disappeared forever from the American landscape, places that once fed a nation and then vanished, leaving only nostalgia behind. Number 1. Sambo's restaurant-to-restaurant chains were as recognizable in the 1970s as Sambo's. At its peak, the coffee shop chain operated more than 1,100 locations across 47 states, making it one of the largest family dining chains in the country. Founded in 1957 in Santa Barbara, California by Sam Battistone and Newell Bonnet, Sambo's became a staple of American roadside dining throughout the 1960s and into the 1970s. Known for its pancakes, coffee, and casual, all-day dining atmosphere, the chain was famous for being open 24 hours a day, which made it a magnet for truckers, late-night diners, and families looking for affordable, no-fuss meals. But Sambo's carried a deeply problematic name, derived from a combination of the founders' names. The branding nonetheless invoked a racist children's story, and the imagery used in the restaurants reflected that connection. As civil rights awareness grew and public pressure mounted throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the chain faced boycotts, protests, and a massive public relations crisis it couldn't survive. Many locations rebranded under different names in an attempt to distance themselves from the controversy, but the damage was done. By 1982, the company had filed for bankruptcy and nearly all locations had closed. Today, only one original Sambo remains, the very first one in Santa Barbara, operating as a historical relic of a deeply complicated era in American dining history. Number 2. Henry's Hamburgers. Long before McDonald's and Burger King dominated every street corner in America, Henry's Hamburgers was giving them a serious run for their money. Founded in 1954 in Benton Harbor, Michigan, Henry's grew aggressively through the 1960s and became a familiar sight across the Midwest and beyond during the 1970s. At its height, the chain boasted hundreds of locations, and its no-frills approach to fast food, cheap burgers, fries, and shakes served quickly, resonated with working-class families who wanted a hot meal without spending a lot of money. Henry's was considered one of the true pioneers of the fast food industry, predating many of the giants we know today. However, as McDonald's and Burger King ramped up their national marketing campaigns, invested in franchise infrastructure, and rolled out consistent branding strategies on a massive scale, smaller chains like Henry's simply couldn't keep pace. Without the advertising budgets, supply chain efficiencies, or name recognition of the big players, Henry's began to fade through the late 1970s and into the 1980s. Franchisees struggled, locations closed one by one, and by the late 1980s, the chain had effectively ceased to exist. It is a story repeated across the fast food industry. The original innovators swallowed by the giants they helped inspire. Number 3. Lum's Restaurant. Lum's was one of the quirkiest and most beloved casual dining chains of the late 1960s and 1970s. Founded in Miami Beach, Florida in 1956 by brothers Clifford and Stuart Burke, Lum's was best known for its beer-steamed hot dogs, a unique cooking method that gave its frankfurters a distinctive taste that customers absolutely loved. The chain grew rapidly and by the early 1970s had hundreds of locations across the country, offering a fun, casual atmosphere with a menu that went beyond hot dogs to include burgers, sandwiches, and other American comfort foods. Lum's was particularly popular in the Southeast and along the Eastern Seaboard, where it became a go-to spot for families and young people looking for a laid-back meal. But the chain made a strategic error that would prove fatal. In the early 1970s, Lum's acquired Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, a massive financial undertaking that strained the company's resources and diverted attention from its core restaurant business. The acquisition proved too costly to sustain, and as the restaurant chain struggled under the financial weight of a Las Vegas casino empire it wasn't equipped to manage, locations began closing throughout the mid-1970s. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, lumps had virtually disappeared from the American dining scene. Its beer-steamed hot dogs reduced to a fond memory. Number 4. Carrol's Restaurants. Carrol's Restaurants holds an interesting place in fast food history. It was actually the original Burger King franchisee, operating hundreds of Burger King locations before eventually converting its standalone locations or selling them off. But before and alongside that relationship, Carrol's operated its own branded restaurants, which were a recognizable fixture in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states throughout the 1960s and 1970s. The chain's standalone restaurants served burgers, fries, and classic American fast food in a style that was familiar and comfortable to millions of regional customers. As the burger wars of the 1970s intensified and brand identity became increasingly important, maintaining a separate chain identity while also running Burger King franchises became an unsustainable balancing act. The Carrol's name gradually faded, absorbed into the Burger King system, and the distinctive Carrol's identity was lost. Today, Carrol's Restaurant Group still exists as one of the largest Burger King franchisees in the world. But the Carrol's brand itself, the one that millions of Northeasterners remembered from childhood, has been gone for decades. Number 5. Dog and Suds. If you grew up in the Midwest in the 1960s or 1970s, there is a good chance you remember the distinctive root beer mugs and car hop service at Dog and Suds. Founded in Champaign, Illinois in 1953 by the teachers Donald Hanaker and Raymond Garner, Dog and Suds was a drive-in chain that leaned into the classic American car culture of the post-war era. Customers would pull up, a car hop would take their order, and they'd enjoy hot dogs, burgers, and, most importantly, the chain's signature homemade draft root beer, served in frosty mugs. At its peak in the late 1960s, Dog and Suds operated around 600 locations, making it a dominant presence in the drive-in market. But as drive-in culture began to fade in the 1970s, replaced by the convenience of drive-through windows and indoor seating, Dog and Suds found itself on the wrong side of a major cultural shift. The chain struggled to adapt, locations closed steadily through the 1970s, and by the 1980s the brand had all but vanished. A handful of independent locations continue to operate under the name today, but the Dog and Suds chain as a national phenomenon belongs firmly to the past. Number 6. Burger Chef. Burger Chef is perhaps the most heartbreaking story in American fast food history. A chain that was bigger than McDonald's at one point, but ultimately couldn't survive the brutal competition of the fast food wars. Founded in Indianapolis in 1954, Burger Chef grew explosively through the 1960s, becoming the second largest hamburger chain in the country by the early 1970s. With over 1,000 locations nationwide, the chain was genuinely innovative. It introduced a Kid-S meal with a toy and activity materials years before McDonald's rolled out the Happy Meal, pioneered the self-service model that became standard across the industry and offered a menu that competed favorably with any of its rivals. But Burger Chef was passed around between corporate owners. General Foods acquired it in 1968 and struggled to maintain the brand's momentum, and operational inconsistencies began to erode customer loyalty. A tragic event in 1978 when Burger Chef employees were murdered at a location in Speedway, Indiana, cast a long shadow over the brand. By 1982, Hardee's purchased the chain and converted most locations, and the Burger Chef name was erased from the American restaurant landscape, leaving behind only the nostalgia of those who remember its famous burger and fun meal boxes. Number 7. Minnie Pearl's Chicken. Country music royalty meets fried chicken. That was the concept behind Minnie Pearl's Chicken, one of the most ambitious and ultimately disastrous restaurant chain launches of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Founded in Nashville in 1968 by John J. Hooker, the chain was built around the celebrity of Minnie Pearl, the beloved comedic performer, known for her role on the Grand Ole Opry and her signature hat, with a price tag still dangling from it. The plan was to rival Kentucky Fried Chicken by leveraging celebrity branding and franchise expansion, and for a moment it worked. The chain grew rapidly, attracting investors and franchisees who believed they were getting in on the next big thing. At its peak, Minnie Pearl's Chicken had dozens of locations and seemed poised for national dominance. But the franchise model was fundamentally flawed. The company was plagued by financial mismanagement, and the rapid expansion had outpaced the chain's ability to maintain quality and consistency. By the early 1970s, the chain had collapsed under the weight of its own ambition and financial irregularities, leaving investors and franchisees holding the bag. and leaving diners without their celebrity-endorsed fried chicken. Number 8. Ponderosa Steakhouse. Ponderosa Steakhouse was the working man's steakhouse, affordable, filling, and available in hundreds of locations across the country during its heyday in the 1970s. Founded in Kokomo, Indiana in 1965, Ponderosa expanded aggressively throughout the late 1960s and hit its stride in the 1970s, offering budget-friendly steaks, buffet sides, and a cafeteria-style service model that made a sit-down steak dinner accessible to families. Who couldn't afford a white tablecloth restaurant? The Western-themed decor, with its rustic wood paneling and frontier imagery, gave the chain a distinctive identity that resonated with middle American families. At its peak, Ponderosa operated several hundred locations and was genuinely beloved in the communities it served. However, the combination of changing consumer tastes, increased competition from both fast food chains and more upscale casual dining concepts, and corporate ownership changes gradually eroded Ponderosa's market position. The chain has dwindled dramatically from its peak, with only a handful of locations remaining today, primarily in the Midwest, a ghost of its former self, though still technically alive in limited form. Number 9. Rustler Steakhouse. Another entry in the budget steakhouse category. Rustler Steakhouse was a chain that offered inexpensive steak dinners in a fast food style environment. You'd order at a counter, carry your tray to your table, and enjoy a no-frills steak experience at prices that almost anyone could afford. Founded in the late 1960s and popular throughout the 1970s, Rustler competed directly with Ponderosa and Bonanza in the value steakhouse segment. The chain was particularly popular in the mid-Atlantic and northeastern states, where its combination of affordability and the novelty of a steak dinner proved enormously appealing to working-class families. Like so many of its competitors, Rustler couldn't survive the economic pressures of the late 1970s and early 1980s, when rising beef prices, increased competition, and shifting consumer preferences hit the budget steakhouse segment particularly hard. The chain faded away quietly, its locations either closing or converting to other brands, leaving behind fond memories of those perfectly serviceable, affordable steaks on cafeteria trays. Number 1. Biff Burger. Biff Burger was a regional fast food chain that enjoyed significant popularity in the Southeast during the 1960s and into the 1970s. Known for its flame-broiled burgers, a distinctive cooking method that set it apart from the flat-top grilled burgers offered by most competitors, Biff Burger developed a loyal following in Florida and the surrounding states. The chain's cooking method actually predated Burger King's famous flame-broiling technique, and many food historians consider Biff Burger an important but underappreciated pioneer in the fast food space. However, lacking the national marketing infrastructure and franchise development resources of the larger chains, Biff Burger remained a regional player even as the fast food industry consolidated around national brands, as McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's expanded their southern presence throughout the 1970s. Biff Burger's market share eroded steadily. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the chain had effectively disappeared, another regional casualty of the national fast food wars. If you found this walk down memory lane as meaningful as we did, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear which of these restaurants you remember and what your favorite memories are. Did you grow up going to Burger Chef on Friday nights? Did you take your first date to a Red Barn? Do you still mourn the loss of those Wetson's burgers? Share your stories with us. These are the memories that connect us across generations and remind us that food is always about so much more than eating. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. We dive deep into American food history, lost restaurants, forgotten brands, and the cultural stories behind the meals that shaped our nation. And there is so much more to come. Share this video with someone who loves American history or grew up eating at any of these iconic spots. Chances are, it'll bring back memories they haven't thought about in years. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.